Ha distribuito solo
He only handed out death.
ha dato lavoro, ma
He gave work,
contemporaneamente dava
but
morte.
at the same time gave us death.
L'industria dell'amianto
The asbestos industry caused thousands of victims throughout the world. What are the responsibilities of the Swiss Eternit company? And did the executives and owners know about the dangers for the workers, the voice of the victims, while waiting for the Turin courts to issue a final verdict? Good evening to you, and welcome to Falò. Not far from the Italian-Swiss area, in Casale Monferrato, every week there is a new mesothelioma victim or sufferer. So far in the Piedmontese city there have been 1,600 people who have died. It is in fact a mass slaughter. And who is responsible for this? The victims say that it is the Eternit company that closed after years of work. And let us now see what is the responsibility of the Schmidheiny family, the Swiss Schmidheiny family that owned it. There is currently a court case in Turin, and the prosecution have asked for 20 years for Stefan Schmidheiny. The defendants will, in fact, speak, or their lawyers will speak at the end of the month. We have tried to contact Stefan Schmidheiny to hear his version of the facts, but unfortunately, our requests, which we can prove, have been turned down. We hope that he will accept to talk to us at the end of the court case. The history of asbestos and of the victims in Italy and in the world, the role of Eternit in the present and past, will be illustrated by this documentary by Guerci, Roselli and Gentili. 22nd of July 2009, the Turin courts decide that the trial can be held against the owners of the major multinational. The judge agrees to the public prosecution's demand. When that happened, many of us started crying. There'd been more than 30 years waiting for us. It was one of the most moving moments of my life. That's how I experienced it. With many other family members of the victims, we shared that moment. The defendant is the Belgian Jean-Louis de Cartier and the Swiss Stefan Schmidheiny, who are under investigation 40 years after the events took place. Willful environmental disaster and non-compliance with health and safety measures. The multinational of the victims. Workers go to work to earn their lives, to earn a living, but not to die. We hope that France will follow Italy's example. The Turin case goes beyond the regional issue. In fact, it is the asbestos-related issues which underlies public prosecutor Guariniello's investigation. The first thing I'd like to say is that Europe and the European Parliament is watching what is happening today. Stefan Schmidheiny is hiding. He hasn't got the courage to come to Italy. Schmidheiny is being tried, and of course he feels very bitterly about it, says the lawyer of the defendant, because He believes that his behavior is not worthy of being censored as it is. In any case, so that we will deal with the trial, and we have great trust in the justice system, and that justice will be done.
Stefan
Schmidheiny only speaks through his lawyers. The other defendant, the Belgian, does not speak. Neither are attending the trial where they are called to answer what happened in the Italian Eternit plants, that they both were the owners of. I come from Belgium. My family has paid a very high toll simply because we lived closer to the Eternit plant. Your dearest and nearest that have departed will be proud of the relentlessness and dignity with which you have been fighting. The victims from other countries look up to you and support you. Eternit Belgium celebrated its 100th anniversary in 2006. The Emsensen family is the fourth richest in the country. I remember that my father used to come home and try to reassure my mother, who was worried because television was starting to talk about the dangers of asbestos. So once he spoke to the director, who's also a relation of the owners, and his desk was covered in dust. And this manager licked the dust from his fingers and said to my father, "You clearly understand that if it were dangerous, I wouldn't do it." But he died of mesothelioma. Mesothelioma is the name of the cancer which asbestos causes. The development of mesothelioma can take place for even 40 years after contact. Thousands and thousands of people die the world throughout. In the course of the Turin trial, the mesothelioma will be the focus of the Casale Monferrato witnesses. There was a big plant that was closed in 1986 there. I don't wish to hold a grudge. I wish for no vendetta, but I would like the guilty parties, the ones who are responsible for this situation, I wish them to have the opportunity to follow one mesothelioma victim from the beginning, from the onset of the disease to the person's death. I was 24 years old when I started working in Eternit, and I started seeing a lot of death posters. As in Italy, you put up a poster every time a person dies in a village or in a city. And we'd see people dying, workers dying. There were too many of them. I could physically see the number of people who died. This type of visualization, as I called it, had an impact on me because, as well as the name and surname, they were the ages, 48, 52. And this was the first time I realized what was happening. One thing is to say, here's the dust, you can be sick. But one other thing is to say, people are dying before they can even retire. This trial should have been held 40 years ago. We're lagging behind, but maybe we're still in time. We're still in time to get a reliable photograph, or quite reliable photograph, of what was happening. And that is in the definition of an environmental disaster inside and outside the factory, that it was willful, that is to say that they were aware of what was happening and they still went on, and permanent. It means that the causes that led to the disaster are still there. We don't know whether this will be recognized by the verdict. Where the Eternit Casale offices were, it seems that everybody ran away as if there'd been a nuclear disaster. The same happened outside. When the factory closed, the asbestos for the production just stayed there. It was left there to lie, abandoned, transforming the plant in an enormous toxic mound. So, in Casale Monferrati, some medical definitions, like mesothelioma, which is otherwise a very rare cancer, is commonplace. Every year in Casale, with a population of 36,000, there are 50 new cases. The population of Casale, both those who are sick and who are healthy, know everything about mesothelioma. They know the symptoms, the onset, they know the type of diagnosis that you must carry out to reach diagnosis, the results of the treatment, which is not good. They're also well informed about the prognosis and about the fact that no one has ever recovered, and that currently there is no effective screening program to have early diagnosis. Justice, research, and decontamination. For 30 years, the people of Casale Monferrato have been fighting for the fact that their dead are not dead by chance, but are the result of the work of that factory. They're not only former workers, but above all, people who simply lived in that small city, but on a legal. However, from a legal point of view, the battle seemed to be over, and justice in Casale had already spoken. New exposure was simply filed away. We asked ourselves, as Association of the Victims of Asbestos, why do we have to close it like this? If it's still open, if we're still dying, what can help us understand? And the fact that there are tens of deaths, the people we take to the cemetery, how can you say it has to be filed away when we're still taking our dead to the cemetery? My name is Enzo Merler. I'm a doctor, and I work on the mesothelioma registers. I know that your husband had a mesothelioma and he worked at Eternit. An unexpected help came from the European Union, which in the 80s asked its member states to count mesotheliomas. Dr. Enzo Merler discovered that many former migrants died of mesothelioma, which is a rare cancer of the pleura. We started collecting and gathering information on the cases of mesothelioma in the Venetian area in 1987, and 2001 we also wrote an article on the Scientific Journal, and we said that there were a number of cases that were related to the work at the Eternit in Niederur, in the Garona canton, which is the fief of the Smedainis. Currently, they don't use asbestos, and the factory no longer belongs to it. But for essentially, the dangerous fiber enabled the dynasty to accumulate an enormous amount of money. Tons and tons of asbestos were poured out, and the impact was also measured by the Swiss register of cancer, or cancer register, in the 90s. There was a peak of mesotheliomas, and the statistics were not as accurate as Dr. Merler discovered. Many migrant workers had gone back to die to their villages. In fact, from the Venetian areas, because there'd been a big migration from the Venetian area in Italy to this area in Switzerland for the Eternit company. How many people went to work in Switzerland? My mother and my father. They used to work there. Yes, both of them. Did they work at the Eternit company? No, neither of them worked at Eternit. Your father is here working as a farmer. And your mother? She died in November. What did she die of? Mesothelioma, pleural mesothelioma. Although she never worked at Eternit. Yes, she never worked. But you see, my wife was always there. She was always coming to see me. We used to go out. Before we got married, she used to live there with her sister. And you see, there she is.
E dopo passava anche per andare a lavorare.
When she went to work in her factory, she used to go past Eternit. Are there any other members of the family that were linked to Nibiru? Yes, my mother's brother and my mother's sister, they both worked at Eternit. inside the factory, yes. Did they have any health problems? Yes. They died, both of them. So 3 mesothelioma deaths in your family. Did you like living in Switzerland? Yes. Why? Well, it was beautiful. A lot of supermarkets. In those days, we didn't have any supermarkets here. And then you could go around. There were beautiful places, and I liked it. Sergio lived in some barracks near the factory. I found letters that he'd written to me, and he was cutting these sheets and the Eternit. So he was working on asbestos. We couldn't understand why he was ill. Well, he used to come back home and say, "Look what I've got." And he had all these sort of spots or vesicles or boils on him, and that's what it was. We didn't know about it. We didn't know what was going on. He used to come back, and he had his overalls, and we used to wash them. I don't know. I don't know if I too got it. That's how he died. I found him dead because the nurse sent him home for a few days. He came home and I said, "Sergio." And he said he was sleeping, and I went there. But he was dead. And what? Because I wasn't prepared for that. You know? I saw him. His eyes were open, his mouth was open, but it was just a bundle of bones. He was so thin. He used to cry so much. He couldn't understand why the Lord was punishing him like that. That's why he was crying. They must pay, because they knew. They knew. They knew. It was since 1910 that they had that factory. I've been collecting information, gathering information for 10 years. Justice. I want justice. The study by Enzo Merler on the workers who came back to die in Italy was published by the Basel University, and in fact it was then found by Raffaele Guariniello, who is the Turin public prosecutor, and that is when he started working. Amongst the former migrants, the magistrate discovered somebody who was Piedmontese. Guariniello opened an investigation which started from Niederun, but immediately also involved the other Eternit plants, Cavagnolo, Casale, Bagnoli, Riviera. It's a national investigation. The various public prosecutions in Italy allowed Guariniello to carry out the investigation for them too, because it was a single trial which referred to this queried liability. The people of Casale immediately reacted to this situation and submitted 1,000 claims. They organized a press conference in Turin where, before handing it to the public prosecution, they tried to explain what they were doing. Amongst this, a trade unionist who came from Switzerland, Franco Basciani, who formerly worked for Eternit. He met workers who had worked in Turin and then had been sent to Switzerland. Did you get to know him? Yes, he died. Do you know that he died? Yes, he did. Yes. But, you know, it wasn't even recognized in Switzerland, but there was so much dust in Switzerland. Unfortunately, still today, there are many people who talk about people who are dying and because of the dust in Niederun, and it's a story that's going on and on. Here you can see this one died. This one's dead too. These are the overalls. This is 1986. I washed those overalls. This was part of the machine. You can see the machine there. For many a year, Franco Basciani has been trying to encourage the Niederund Eternit workers to join together and do something to obtain, if not justing, at least adequate compensation for deaths due to asbestos. In 2005, he went to Apulia, southern Italy, to join former migrants in a meeting. We have all been tricked. They knew exactly. The company says so. They knew in 76, they admitted that there were health problems, mesotheliomas, asbestomas, plaques. They knew everything. And here you can see it. They gave us no protection to defend our health. And furthermore, they kept telling us that I was, in the case that they considered me, and these are two doctors, that they considered me a person who was healthy enough to work with asbestos.
La SUVA, l'Istituto
The SUVA, the Swiss Occupational Health Agency, has the health services. Guariniello asked for a copy for the ones that concern the people who came back to Italy to die. SUVA opposed the demand. 5 years went by. Guariniello at that point had to close the investigative phase, and he had to eliminate all the part which concerned former migrants. The former Italian workers who died or developed the disease once they came back from Niederun, who were in fact the ones who started the investigation, were excluded from the Turin case. But they would have a lot to tell in a court. My name is Importone Donato. How many years at Eternit? 9 years and 6 months. Francesco. Russo. My name is Antonio Mariello. Viaggio Tarantino. Niederun, yes. 12 years. From 67 to 83. 84 to 1919. First I worked for 12 years, then I went back, and I worked another year and a half. So a recurrence, yes. My brother-in-law worked there, and he said, if you want to come here, there's a job. Were you paid well? No. A lot of dust? Who? Every 2 or 3 days, you had to change everything completely. For the first 5 years, I slept in the barracks that were close by. It wasn't too bad. I wasn't unhappy. We couldn't understand things. We ate in the barracks. The table was made out of Eternit. The chairs were made out of Eternit. My wardrobe was made out of Eternit. The cupboard was Eternit. The food cupboard was Eternit. After 4 years, I started to understand something. You heard about people who were dying, and they say, what did he die of? And they kept saying that he died because he'd worked in that factory. Swiss people died. Italians died. Where there was my workshop, about 10 died. Oswald Beat was a friend of mine, and we spoke on the phone recently, and he said, I'm at the end of the line. My brother died 2 years ago. He handed out death. He gave us work, but at the same time, he was giving us death. So be it. About 1,200 former migrants came back to southern Italy. Recently, an agreement between INAIL and SUVA, the two occupational agencies, undergo tests. About a third have been affected by asbestos. The Italian community is still present in Niederun. My grandfather was born in Italy, and then in the 50s he came to Switzerland. First he worked in Bern, and then he came to Niederrhein here and worked with the Eternit and stayed between 82 to 87. He worked on pipes. He lived here in the village, and then he went back to Italy in 2005 and died. He died of pleural mesothelioma.
Giuseppe Sovrano.
Giuseppe Sovrano had come from the region of Friuli. His children grew up in Switzerland, stayed here, and married one of his daughters, a southerner from Italy who'd come up to Switzerland, had emigrated. Their grandchildren only speak German. Deborah is at high school, and she has studied asbestos as a project for her high school certificate. I was really very struck by the different approach that the Swiss and the Italians have, completely different way of dealing with the topic. Here in Switzerland, people are very shy about talking about it, while in Casale you can ask anyone and everybody knows where Eternit was, what asbestos is, and many have a banner in their windows that says Eternit Justice. Eternit still feeds us. Your son or your son-in-law or your daughter works there, and no one must dare speak up against them because they still feed us. I only knew that my grandfather had cancer, and it was only much later when he died did I discover that his disease had to do something with asbestos, that it was an asbestos-related cancer. At that point, we started the legal negotiations with SUVA. What really hurt us a lot was that when he died, we tried to send all the information that had been given us in Italy to SUVA, but then a gentleman from SUVA came here and just offered us some cash, sort of compensation, with a ridiculous sum, 2,000 Swiss francs. He said this was to compensate for funeral expenses. This is shameful, and it helps me understand that SUVA was perfectly aware, because otherwise, if I didn't feel guilty, they wouldn't offer a compensation for the funeral. We clearly refused, we didn't accept, because we felt that once again we were being made fun of. If you'll allow me, they were more than making fun of us. Thanks to a lawyer, the Sovrano family obtained a compensation of 40,000 francs from SUVA, but not from Eternit. The Swiss legal system, in fact, says that the insurance has to pay out the compensation. Only if there were a verdict finding the company guilty would they pay, but no Swiss court has ever opened this, because after 10 years the statute of limitation kicks in, which is before the asbestos-related diseases develop. This has recently been discussed. Switzerland is the world champion in this problem of statute of limitation, because the owners who had Eternit just behind me had direct contacts, and I can prove this, I'm a lawyer, had direct contacts with the Bern Federal Council, and they introduced a specific ad hoc law to shorten the statute of limitations in Switzerland for these type of crimes. But there is no statute of limitation for the SUVA, but they really don't want or have been very reluctant to hand in the information on the workers, because there should also be a measurement of the asbestos fibers in the factory, which SUVA had to gather. SUVA has done nothing, absolutely nothing, to see what happened to the victims or the people who were suffering from asbestos-related diseases in the factory. They just measured the amount of dust, but did not introduce any safety measurements. SUVA refuses to release the information because it fears that then action may be taken about SUVA.
Veniva la SUVA a controllare l'ambiente di
Did
lavoro?
Suva ever come to control the environment? Nope.
Io non l'ho mai visto.
I never saw any Suva officials. Well, there were some women who used to work with emery paper, and every 6 months they were sent to Zurich but they said it was for eczema. And they said, drink a lot of milk. But I don't think that the eczema was a problem, or nor that the milk the solution. Who told them to drink milk? The Zurich doctors. They told these women. They never told us anything. They never examined us. Well, I sometimes saw the Suva people. They looked at the dust, they measured it, but they never said anything to us. They didn't say, look, in that shop floor, it's more dangerous than another one. They never said anything. They never said anything. They were in agreement. They were in cahoots. Were you ever afraid? I didn't know anything, so I wasn't afraid. In the last few years, when I wasn't too well, they moved me. It's better for you to go and work in another place. And in the end, they sacked me. When things get difficult, if you were sick, they sacked you. Because in practice, they knew. They knew what your disease was. Had you realized that it could be dangerous? Yes, but nobody told us. I realized after. Had you understood? No. Well, if everybody knew, if we had known that asbestos led to mesothelioma, well, certainly we wouldn't have worked there. None of us would have. Who wants to die? No one. Suva, yes, came. And once I went to Luzerne, but they never gave us any information. They never gave us any of the results. They never told us positive or negative results. They never said anything. I think doctors, Dr. Bendel, doctors in this area need new glasses, better glasses, because it's something I really can't understand. You never took things seriously. Here in Canton Garonne in particular, you treated these people without taking them seriously. In Casale Monferrato, doctors are helping asbestos victims, former workers, when the associations call them. Here in Glarona, we have to go and fish you out, and when you do, you're very modest, very reserved. I think that in Eternit, things that shouldn't have happened. I must agree with this. The doctors of the Canton Garonne never, in fact, took part in the asbestos Eternit battle. I must admit this. And Eternit, what does it say in all this? The current owner bought it after the asbestos era and therefore declines any responsibility. That notwithstanding, he has established a 2 million fund to help workers and their families, or families of deceased workers, if in difficulty. How many people have been compensated? Well, about 20 applications, far fewer than what we expected in relation to what we heard before we established the foundation. About 20 applications and about a fourth were compensated. Many who had nothing to do with this. In fact, they had nothing to do with Eternit or with asbestos. We also received a number of applications from southern Italy, Apulia. We therefore believe that the foundation is well known in Italy as well. And what about Stefan Schmidaini? Where is he?
In Italia non si fa vedere. Vive in Costa Rica.
Haven't seen him in Italy. He lives in Costa Rica. He's become a philanthropist, a guru of sustainable development, but occasionally he comes to Europe. We saw him in Basel, but unfortunately we were not able to ask him any questions. For about 10 years we've been asking to meet him, and he has never accepted. He's always declined. My company, in the past 20 years, has planted 250 million trees. I think it is a very important contribution to sustainability. I'm a philanthropist. You said my company, but in fact, you have made it into a trust, but it is certainly still very much your company. Yes, you're quite right. I've devoted my life to it, and that is my blood and flesh. As if you say, it is a company that is not mine, but it is an enterprise that I established and which I've given to the world. And I'm very pleased I've done this. If currently he can invest in philanthropic projects, and it is because he has had a very good career as an industrialist, which started thanks to the very profitable asbestos sector. He started managing the Eternit empire that has plants in 30 countries, partly co-owned with Descartes, who's his co-defendant in Turin. He started managing it in the mid-70s. Thomas, his brother, had the other jewel, Holcim, which is a cement multinational. Thanks to asbestos, his personal fortune grew. He invested in Nestle's, ABB, Swatch, and as from 78, when Scandinavian countries banned asbestos cement, he publicly declared that he had recognized the fact that asbestos was noxious and therefore wanted to reconvert production using other fibers. At the same time, but discreetly, Eternit, jointly with other companies that used asbestos, both public and private one, founded an association, the aim of which was to procrastinate the ban of asbestos in Switzerland. The group also developed a two-pronged communication strategy. One, to prove that it was looking after the health of its workers. William Folter, who is the president of the association, says that the industry that uses asbestos in Switzerland has been involved in the discussion on the impact of the fibers on human beings. Unfortunately, there have been some cases of disease. We're very sorry about this. The other aim, which is shown in the minutes, is the action on the Federal Institute for Health so that asbestos is not included in class 1, the one that has the bone and skulls, and not simply A, which means be careful, attention. Thanks to the investment of various millions, the presence of dust in the air in the companies where asbestos is used has drastically been reduced in the past 2 years. The industrialists of the industry believe that a controlled use of asbestos is more than possible, and that this will avoid further onset of diseases. Consistently with his communication strategy, Eternit in Switzerland opened its plant to the Swiss television, and the factory seemed perfectly healthy. The workers don't need any masks because dust is no longer produced. The production of Eternit takes place with a lot of water, and this type of processing does not generate any dust. It is comparable to a cardboard factory, and the sheets can be broken, cut as if it was glass or cardboard. There is a special saw which only produces large dust particles which are not dangerous for workers' health. You imagine that the ventilator that we had in our workshop was so full of dust because the machines were working so quickly that they were clogging the vent up. You can just imagine how much dust there was. And we couldn't even breathe the air, and we were full of dust. And at one point, I couldn't even see the people who were working next to me. And that's what it was, and that's what it stayed as. In any case, the Association of Industrialists, of Asbestos Industrialists, managed to stop the ban for 10 years, up to 1990. Eternit, however, applied for further exemptions to defend production and jobs, up to 2004. In the course of the 80s, Stefan Schmidheiny progressively divested himself of all the foreign investments, including all the Italian factories. Some were sold, such as the Syracuse one. Others, such as Casale, were simply abandoned, left as they were.
Io definii buttare via il limone ormai.
I said that they had thrown us away like a lemon that had been squeezed. Did they run away? Can I say they escaped? They just left it as it was, with tons and tons and tons of asbestos in it, leaving thousands of tons of asbestos to the winds and just leave. Do you think that that's properly done? Is that a proper behavior? In 1889, Stefan Schmidaini sold the Swiss Eternit to his brother Thomas. He also sold the blue asbestos mines that they had had in South Africa since the 40s. Only in 1992, with the end of apartheid, did he sell the Ederite plant in South Africa, where he worked as an apprentice entrepreneur in South Africa. In 50 years, 500,000 worked the asbestos mines and factories for the Schmidaini family. The former owners of Everite, which was Eternit, knew what danger asbestos was. And also the managers who'd been sent here knew. They never came to visit the plants. They always stayed in the office blocks. They used apartheid to make money. They used apartheid to increase their profits, to maximize them. When the times changed, when the laws changed, they then decided to run away. In 1992, he took part in the World Rio Summit on the Environment. He published books where he maintained the need to have a reconversion of enterprises in an environmentally friendly way. He went to Latin America and created a new empire. In those years, he was mentioned only as a philanthropist. The wind changed when Raffaele Guariniello in 2001 opened his investigation. The indestructible fiber caught up with him. This concerns asbestos, but any cancer cause that has a delayed effect. And after many years, you have the onset of the disease. This must lead companies to carry out preventive actions, because some of the diseases don't develop immediately the disease, and the justice might catch up with them too. So the only hope that some entrepreneurs have is that they too should die of the same disease. And at that point, that the statute of limitation kicks in because the defendant dies. In Latin America, Stefan Schmidaini had sold his companies in the 80s. In Nicaragua, for example, such as the ones in Brazil, related the number of deaths to the asbestos plants. They tried to take him to court, and they also applied for compensation. Problems also in South Africa, where the Everite workers started a court case against the executives, and a fund was established whereby former workers at least got some compensation. The same thing happened in Syracuse, and there was an attack to the executives of the multinationals. We, in fact, went to the criminal court against Stefan Schmidaini and his management, and this caused a problem because we asked for 60 million euros in compensation. And there has now been a further demand of the other workers for a total of 118 million euros. The case in Sicily ended in 2008 with a settlement. The lawyers who represented the heirs of 100 people who died and 160 asbestos-affected people agreed on 8.7 million euros. And furthermore, one of the companies owned by Schmidaini kindly donated to the Syracuse hospital some machinery for the diagnosis and treatment of cancer. In Piedmont, things were slightly more complicated. Thomas Schmidaini, his brother, also gave a donation, 3 million euros, to be shared between Casale, the hospital, and the association. Thomas is not a defendant in Turin, and therefore his offer generated a little suspect. I spent a few nights when I didn't sleep. And I thought, well, should we take it or not? But we knew that we had a very long battle. And when there are situations like this, you have to be very, very careful, because it could be useful, but it could also be destructive. The suggestion was discussed by the assembly, or the meeting of the association, which decided to accept the 500,000 euros, but stating very clearly that they would use them to bus the people from Casale to the trial against Schmidaini's brother, Stefan Schmidaini. We didn't know whether we'd accept or not. We said in the meeting that we would discuss whether we would accept it or not, but somebody asked Thomas why he was giving money to people who were fighting his brother, and he said that it wasn't really a problem, it was just a pittance. And so it was the defendant's brother who paid for the coaches who bussed the people from Casale in. Fewer people now, just before the court case, Stefan Schmidaini offered a lump sum compensation, about 1/3 accepted, but 2/3 refused. One of the municipalities accepted a settlement, just over 2,000 people. There was an Eternit plant that was closed in 1983. In proportion, there are more deaths than in Casale. And then there's also asbestos in the houses, in the football field, in the street. And the municipality accepted the offer, 2 million euros, in exchange for withdrawing from the court case. The relatives of the victims went on, in spite of the municipality withdrawing. Arrived. We had to be very, very careful, because when you talk about money, it's the most delicate thing, and it can be the most dangerous thing. It also can be, you must be very careful. But I always say that to our people, it's our decision. Let's be careful, because either it will be a masterpiece or a disaster. In Turin, Stefan Schmidaini never came, but he's interested in masterpieces. For example, recently he was seen in New York at an auction where he bought a Rothko for $33 million. In the court cases, as witnesses, his brother Thomas come and a former Eternit manager, Leo Mittelholzer, who has now come to various cases. He has already been tried twice in Casale Monferrato and in Sicily. You underwent a court case for cases which refers to Syracuse. Yes, is that so? Yes. This is, but you were in fact found innocent. So today you can speak as a witness. When you joined the Eternit group in 1979, was asbestos known to be dangerous? Yes, we did. We clearly knew that asbestos. But there was also a plan. We had to replace asbestos, and in the meantime, we had to work asbestos with precautions. This was very clearly stated. In the 70s and in the 80s, in fact, public tenders in Italy insisted on asbestos. That is to say, there are the local authorities that issued decrees in 84 and 85 that stated you must have asbestos coating. Why? Maybe there was a very strong lobby of asbestos that imposed this. No, it was a miraculous material. You know what emerged? Something absolutely terrible. Is that it's enough for a microfiber of asbestos to generate the disease.
Sich immer klar geäußert hat, dass ein sicherer Umgang mit Asbest eine Notwendigkeit ist.
I also know that my brother has always clearly expressed himself, suggesting that a safe work with asbestos or safe conditions of work are necessary. He's always been in favor of this, and he knew that this was a very complex issue. I think that Smedini's first thoughts are for the tragedy that has taken place, and he is deeply and sincerely sorry about the tragedy. This is his first and foremost feeling, pain. Philanthropic activities are in fact reducing his personal fortune. He has withdrawn from all entrepreneurial activities, transforming the $1 billion empire of Latin America into a trust. The Avena Foundation was established in 1994 by the Swiss entrepreneur Stefan Smedini with the aim of promoting sustainable development throughout Latin America. With plants in 12 countries, and in Brazil it has been active since 1999. Avena identifies people who are involved in social transformation, people with an entrepreneurial profile who are moved by principles that are consistent with our foundations: human dignity, development of the human being, democracy, respect for the environment, and new opportunities, equal opportunities, social responsibility, and solidarity.
Stefan Smedini, restiamo in Sud America.
Stefan Smedini will stay in South America. Let us talk about what you've done here. You have incorporated all your enterprises, and with the profits from this trust, the Avena Foundation is funded in Latin America, which in turn has as an aim public utility projects. Yes, after my experience at the Rio conference, I decided I wanted to do something practical. At that time, my father had died, and my younger brother. A good opportunity to think about the fact that we're not here forever. And so we decided to do something great. In March 2004, my daughter said, "Mother, I too have mesothelioma." The only thing she said, "I want my hair. I don't want you." She had beautiful hair.
Romana Pavesi
Blasotti lost her daughter, her husband, her sister, a cousin, and one of her grandchildren. In 1982, when my husband died, 25 people died a year. Now they're over 50 every year. Yes, 50 a year. Was it worth it? Was it worth it for the profits? He's one of the richest men of the world. Did he need it? Some of the rich men in the world compete about how much money they got. Was it worth for Casale? Was it worth 1,600 lives?
A Niederurnen, la domanda di Romana Pavesi.
At Niederurnen, Romana Pavesi's voice and her question have had no hearing and no answer.
Con questo documento si decreta l'esclusione.
With this document, they have decreed the exclusion of the Swiss Eternit from any liability, any civil liability. The Italian justice system says that Eternit's rights has nothing to do with the case in Turin because it has changed hands and that the current ownership is not included. What about the past? Raffaele Guadagnello has started an Eternit bis investigation, and since then, Suva has sent the files. So, maybe the time of those who were excluded is about to come. This is the story, the touching story, which the victims tell. We said it in the course of the presentation. The trial is underway. For the time being, there is no responsibility that has been legally proved. We would like to add to conclude that Suva is also included. We asked them to give us an interview on the role of Suva, but Suva declined, but has answered in writing, and we took into consideration what they said in organizing and filming this documentary.